Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee of North Norfolk District Council on Tuesday, the 9th of September. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yeah, we have Councillor Penfold's apologies and no substitutes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any? I don't believe we have any public questions.
No public questions.
Lovely, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? No? Items of urgent business. We have one item of urgent business, but I'm going to bring it in at 14A towards the end of the meeting. Okay. Minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes of the last meeting, please? No? I had a couple of. On page 10, where we talk about the Kings Lynn and West Norfolk Borough Council and the car parking penalty charges, do we have any examples yet of how that's going? Page 10, paragraph 3. Just wondered if we... This is just for... Yeah, this is just for information. This is not for...
So we've recently received the draft service level agreement from Kings Lynn and West Norfolk. So we're just in the process of reviewing that. Okay,
so we're not. And I had another question on page 11, the third paragraph down on item 10. It said the overall performance for the main contractor performing internal audit for the council was red. This could move to amber as the last reports were finalised. And I just wondered whether that has happened or not. Okay, lovely. In which case, if everyone is prepared to accept those as a true record of the meeting, I obviously wasn't here, so I need one of you to propose and second, please. Thank you both, Councillor Boyle and Councillor Fletcher. And all those in favour of accepting as a true record, please. Thank you very much. Right, so we move on to the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee update and action list. I did that. Okay, so to receive a written update on the progress of the recommendation contained within the private sector. So an update was, I understand, provided at the last meeting. So then we have a couple of actions from internal audit that we haven't got a comment on, but I think we've received an update since before the meeting. I wonder whether you could possibly update those that might not have read it this morning. Thank you. So the first one was about a progress update each month. And I know we've had it this month, but I don't know whether, I don't remember seeing it the last couple of months. Okay.
Yeah, we had this month, but we've done August. That got emailed across. So then it's down to the council to email it out to.
No, absolutely. If we're
definitely doing it. We're definitely doing it. So
that's something you could follow up, please, because I don't know about any other members if they've seen the monthly updates at all, apart from this one. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And the performance manager to discuss with the responsible officer the lack of property assessments and the committee to be updated. Okay. Thank you. To to provide an update on the oldest two outstanding recommendations and to obtain and share an update on NN 2202 relating to, so we've just had the update on that one, but do we have an update regarding the oldest two outstanding recommendations, please, somebody? Steve, I don't know whether you're able to comment on these. Not used, sorry. Sorry, Officer Hems. Okay, I've got Kay very kindly printed me a list, but it's very, very teeny and I can't read it at the moment without spending some time. Thank you. I think everything else is up to date. Is everyone happy that everything else is up to date? Anyone got any questions on that? Land charges, where? Which number, please? Ah, yes, update on land charges audit. I didn't.
We have a date for the formal transfer of land charges to the land registry. That work was due to be completed imminently, I think by the end of this month.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we've had notice served upon us by the land registry, and it will take place in October. That was confirmed by an email of the 19th of August to the authority, and it is with the business manager within the planning department. And that's when the land charges level 1 search function moves to the land registry.
Okay. Happy with that? Thank you. Councillor Hems, I believe you can now enlighten us.
Sorry, just to add to that,
Thank you.
because I have the planning under my area of control now. I have some documents to sign off as they are coming through with land registry. So there are some gateway activities going on so that they can complete that activity, and that's due those are due this week. So I have various calls and meetings with them to resolve those. So going back to your previous question in terms of the update on the two longest outstanding. So from the document you've kindly provided, I think the two oldest, one is to do with the penalty charge notice on the car parks, and obviously you've heard that one is an ongoing position in terms of the service level agreement that we've just received and are reviewing, and the other one is in terms of the licensing income and the reconciliation with the account. So on that one, there is a position where it is being done manually because the system is still in development, or the automation is still in development with the software company, and we are beholden to the software company to integrate with the others, but it is in place manually. And my understanding is that there has been a discussion about monitoring that and then sending it for sign off by internal audit as a ability to sign it off and have that dealt with. So those two oldest, if they are the two oldest ones and they are on the list as those, then that's the update on those.
Terrific. Thank you. And so we can expect to see them closed out shortly.
It's my understanding that they both should be in a position where they can, once the SLA is in place, I think that will deal with the penalty charge notice issue adequately so it can be sent for completion. And I think certainly the position is that the licensing one the methodology that in place is robust. It's not in accordance with the recommendation, because the recommendation refers to integration of the systems. The hope was that we could automate it, but there are systems in place so that the reconciliation happens, albeit not as smoothly and as efficiently as I think we would like.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody got any questions on those now? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. So that closes out that. So now we move to. I'm just looking at, sorry, I was just looking at the internal audit plan because I was. No, we've got that on the agenda. We haven't got it on the agenda, have we? Did everyone have a chance to look at the internal audit report that we received? Yes. We haven't actually got it on the agenda, have we, properly? It was after the agenda was done, wasn't it? Because I'm just thinking it would, if we took it now, then that would help you, I'm sure. Yes, that was what. Shall we take it as a 8A and then the internal auditor can be freed up? Do you have anything you'd like to say about this, Teresa?
Not especially. The work is going on. I don't think we're behind in any way at the moment. It's ticking along and expecting everything to carry on at this stage. Quite
So
happy.
Are we still expecting an external audit later in the year?
Yes, that's scheduled to start. All the planning has been done. That the main part of the field work is expected to be November.
Okay,
To start in November. So we've received all the requests for information from EY and we're in the process of giving them all the information, then they'll come back in November to do the audit.
they're not waiting on anything from us at this stage or anything from the internal auditor at this stage.
So we have an agreed timetable with them where we will send all the information to them, and I think that agreed date is the 22nd of September. So we're on track to hit that.
Okay, lovely. Teresa, are you happy that everything's in place as well? Lovely. Okay. Anybody else have any questions on any of this? Councillor Holiday.
Just to cross-reference the top two number of outstanding actions, which is cybersecurity and waste management, against the risk register. Is this the place to do it, or do you want to do it at the risk register stage?
Probably at the risk register.
Okay, so
think.
put a hold on that. Place mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless anybody else along the top table thinks we should take it now. No. Okay, I mean, I think it's worth noting that we are now down to 29 recommendations, which I think when I took over, we were at something like 43. So that's a huge effort by the team, and I would like to thank everybody for getting that going and hopefully seeing continued progress on that. But it's fantastic that we've got as far as we have so far. So thank you.
If I could just comment. So Kay Skinner has recently taken over the monitoring of the audit recommendations. She has put in a system with the colleagues from internal audit on a regular basis where she receives an update and then goes forward and actions those. So we have a robust system in place to monitor. My hope is that for a lot of those that have been outstanding for a while, and I know there are quite a number where those are nearing a completion, so that we will be monitoring them not just for those that have gone over time, but Kay will be monitoring for those as they come in and beginning to push forward and saying what the plan is, what is your arrangements to meet this by the deadline. So I think I've told the committee before, but that is beginning to happen now. So I'm hopeful that we will whittle away at those 29 and we will have far fewer that actually get to a overdue position compared with the recommendation deadline that's been set. So that is in progress. It'll just take a while to filter its way through.
No, and I met with Officer Hems and Councillor Skinner and Kay Skinner earlier last month. And we went through the list together and was very, very pleased with the way things were going. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Just one observation on this, and I don't want to preempt the conversation about risk either, but just sort of interested in how these are prioritized. So clearly time is one factor that you can think about when you're prioritizing these, but risk is another. So if the consequence of not taking various actions is likely to impact on your kind of risk mitigation action, then clearly there does need to be a bit of dovetailing there. So like I said, we may well cover it in the risk section, but if we don't, just sort of interested in ensuring that there is join up and that time isn't necessarily unless there are adverse consequences around the time deadline, that's not the only consideration when you're thinking of the order in which you tackle the remaining ones. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a valid point, but I think as far as I'm aware that anything that is going to impact service or have a more serious consequence is brought to the top of the tree. Is that correct?
So in terms of the internal audit process, and I don't wish to step on Teresa's toes in any way, shape or form, but in effect, when the audit happens, the internal audit will assess the potential impact or the risks associated with the recommendation, not, or the identified issue that has led to the recommendation. And as part of that, they'll assess the likelihood of harm or detriment, etc. And that informs the position in terms of the priority of the recommendation. The priority of the recommendation effectively comes with an automatic time to it. So if it's an urgent, then it'll have a shorter time to comply with. So I would suggest that it's partially built into that. I think certainly in terms of those with the greatest amount of risk, when we're looking at trying to ensure that they are delivered in a timely manner, we are looking at those that we assess as being the greatest potential for loss or some other issue to occur, and trying to move those forward as a priority.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? And thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Teresa. We will move on to the annual governance statement then, please. And the local code of corporate governance. It's on pages 17 to 72. Has anyone got any comments or questions they would like to raise on this document? Councillor Fletcher. Anyone able to take that, please?
So the authorities received a report from the Ombudsman. It has said we should have a dedicated complaints officer, which in an organisation of this size represents a degree of challenge in that we don't have a sufficient number of complaints to employ somebody on a full-time basis for that purpose. So what we've done is we've restructured the customer services team and looked at how stage 1 and stage 2 complaints come into the authority, and the executive assistants in the central executive core are now managing those. We have one work stream around stage 1 complaints. Any stage 2 complaints progress to so stage 1 complaints are investigated by an assistant director. A stage 2 complaint is investigated director level and closed down within the timescales that we publish, which is 15 working days for each of the 2 phases. And I think it's 28 days for any person requesting a stage 2 complaint who are unsatisfied with the stage 1 complaint response. There's a separate work stream and tracking of Member of Parliament correspondence into the authority in respect of issues of public concern or raising issues on behalf of constituents. So we're making sure that we are closing down that correspondence too. And then we in terms of our annual letter from the local government ombudsman and social care ombudsman, the number of complaints that were progressed to their referral last year, I think was 12, and so that reflects the trend in recent years. And I think there was one finding against us where we had to make a small compensatory payment.
I think members, if you read on in the report, look at the monitoring officer's annual report later on, you'll find there that there was a payment, I think, of £200, something like that, that was made to that person. Not just the one case. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. Forgive me if this is an obvious question, but I have not seen this before. Looking on page 24, the diagram, looking at the spread of audit opinions, is that better than last year, worse than last year? Because the general tone of the report is quite positive, as it should be. But I wondered if this was a reflection of movement in the right direction or was capturing some other sort of aspect. Thank you.
So I think this was discussed at the last meeting that we had. The number of limited assurance audits in the last financial year rose to 5, I think, from 3 the previous year. And this is the importance of audits. It is around corporate learning and improvement. And, you know, we do agree the audit plan 12 months in advance so that the Sharman can liaise with the audit contractors around the programming of those audits. And we could put forward audits that, you know, we perceive are low risk in terms of service. So there is a ranking in terms of high risk areas, which are every other year, and that is sort of formal. And then there are other areas where, as a corporate leadership team, we believe there are efficiencies or improvements that could be made. So I'm not unduly concerned that the figure of limited insurance has increased, because I think that's the evidence of a mature organisation that wants to improve and do better. It is about, when that work is undertaken, the speed at which those recommendations and improvements are then put in place. And I think that goes back to the response that Mr. Hems gave a few moments ago in terms of our control and oversight of those actions. And I think historically, as the chair has said, we weren't focused on making sure that long-standing actions were completed and resolved. There is more of a focus on that at the present time. I wouldn't want that position to deteriorate beyond the 5 that we have, but I think last year there were 15 audits undertaken, and I think we moved from, as I say, from 3 to 5 that were of limited assurance.
Did you wish to comment at all, Ms. Sharman?
And I think Steve is correct. We may have 1 or 2 more limited assurance this year, but it is about where we look at our work, where the work is going to be. And that could be that if that happens, yes, we're focusing on something where it is a bit poorer than other areas, but that's the balance of the work.
Thank you.
So I think it's detailed within one of the paragraphs, but I did an exercise where I looked at the audits that were completed in 24-25 compared to the previous year. So I'm trying to get an understanding of the audits that were done in both years, what was the opinion given on those audits. So there was two examples of that, two audits. One of them was reasonable and remained reasonable, and the other one moved from limited up to reasonable. So the ones that were done in both years were either stayed reasonable or improved.
Thank you. That's interesting to know. It's good to know. Any more questions on the annual governance statement, please? Councillor Fletcher.
Um, uh, this has been ongoing for a while. Originally, it was going to be a big, I don't like to use the word reorganisation of the constitution, with some significant changes. But in light of local government reorganisation, it's not of that nature. Nevertheless, it hadn't been reviewed for about 10 years. So there are some changes that needed to be made, and this is due to go to full council this month.
Could you use your microphone, please? It's all right. It just means people at home can hear us better if they are watching.
Sorry, I do beg your pardon. Sorry. Well, broadcasting. I beg your pardon. Sorry, this is on page 44, and it's the respecting the rule of law. And it says the Constitution. This is the second column. How we put this into practice. So the Constitution is regularly updated to include new specific laws and regulations. Blah blah blah, which seems to clash slightly with the idea that the Constitution is undergoing a major overhaul. I mean, that's probably a very niggly point, given what you've just said. To be honest, just now, I mean, why, if it is regularly kind of updated on a rolling program, why is that necessary? Why is it necessary to have a more profound one? But I think probably you've already answered that by suggesting, well, I don't know. Sorry.
I mean, you've probably seen when you get an email from the monitoring officer that there are some points that the monitoring officer can amend within the constitution that don't have to come to full council. But there are other things that, if amended in the constitution, have to be approved by the members. And that's a reason why they sort of get done a bit differently.
I think that's correct. So sometimes some legislation changes and we need to amend what's actually written in the Constitution to tie in with that legislation. I did find a couple of bits that were a little bit outdated, so they had to be updated. But also sometimes where the legislation changes itself, it may impact on a specific procedure that a committee follows. So the terms of reference had to be updated for such things.
Sorry, I'm not putting my microphone on now. I wondered if perhaps the chief exec might be able to tell me what's happening with it. Is it going to be brought back into regular use? Has
Yeah.
it been used? What's happening, please?
So we, in terms of project management and monitoring performance and some of the improvements we've put in place in terms of monitoring audit recommendations, we established three boards: a performance board, or performance and productivity board, a major projects board, and a net zero and decarbonisation board. We have recently appointed a new project management officer to cover some secondment into supporting the food waste programme rollout, and the project management team, of which there are three officers, have looked at their systems and processes and are presenting a revised framework to corporate leadership team tomorrow. Then that will be rolled out now that Mr. McCullum has joined us as Director of Resources and Section 151 officer. So there will be a renewed focus around that, particularly in respect of medium-size projects, in that we have a dedicated project board for our largest project risk at the moment, which is led by Mr. Hems in terms of the Fakenham Leisure and Sports Hub project. And there was a report to Cabinet yesterday around the next stage of that in terms of the construction award, and there were some questions raised around the land transfer agreement with Fakenham Town Council, which is reported in the press today. But in terms of we perhaps have less rigid project management in terms of smaller scale projects, say from 100,000 up to £750,000 or £1 million, and it's that the project management framework revision and Mr. McCullum joining us will have oversight of. So, I think the example that was raised most recently was the delays to the delivery of the new public toilets at Albert Street in Holt, which was delayed significantly because of issues with both Anglian Water and UK Power Networks providing utility connections to that upgraded facility. And so the programme and construction programme was extended by several months, and that was beyond the council's control. But I don't know whether we properly reported the reasons for that beyond the local members and the town council. So it's those issues that we would wish to see more strongly recorded and reported through the revised project management framework.
Excellent. I think that's the thing of a lot of the time, isn't it? Keeping people informed of what's going on so they understand problems that we're facing. Mr. Plan.
Yeah, thanks. That sounds really interesting. I'm just wondering if it's possible to share that framework with this group, as just given the links into risk and the rest of it might be sensible for
Yeah,
look if that's shareable.
It will be after tomorrow. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. On page 30, it said several managers have highlighted the inconsistent completion of updating risk assessments, which looks at what we're talking about a bit later on. And it says highlighting the need for a more robust and coordinated approach. I just wondered what actions are already in place to address this, or if there's any new actions coming on board to address this.
So I think this is how operational risk is managed relative to corporate risk and how one informs the other. Not all operational risks will represent a risk of such scale or magnitude that they would be deemed to be a corporate risk, and it's where those risks are managed at a service level or are escalated. I believe that in the papers that you have this afternoon in terms of corporate risk, we can discuss with you whether you feel that those gradings are appropriate, but the corporate leadership team is discussing those corporate risks on a quarterly basis. And so there is control and records as to where risks have been downgraded or revised upwards. The downgraded ones are largely projects that have moved towards completion, such that the risk is no longer considered to exist at a corporate level. But there are obviously operational risks in terms of service continuity, business as usual, cyber security, but also risks of, you know, accidents on foreshore or those sort of things which we need to manage, which may not represent a corporate risk, but they could happen at any time operationally and need to be owned by service managers.
Okay. Thank you.
So I found the notes that went along with this. I don't know whether this was you or Karen, but whoever it was, it helped save an awful lot of extra questions this afternoon. Because although it meant flicking from one page to another, it meant I could look at them and read them, which I found really helpful. So whoever it was, thank you. Would you like to speak to this item before we get into questions?
Yeah, so these are the draft financial statements for the year ending 31st of March 2025. They are obviously, as you'll be aware, in draft form, so they've had no audit done on them at all at this stage. That's what the requests are being responded to at the moment for those. But they've been sent to EY, and there's been one change to note in terms of the accounting policies which we're required to do, which is the introduction of IFRS 16, which is just to make the reporting around leases more transparent, so it doesn't actually impact us financially at all. It's just a way of presenting the numbers to the users of the financial statements. But other than that, the content is largely the same. That you'll notice there's comments that refer to restatement of figures in there. So we weren't required to do this by audit. These were done to kind of make the financial statements more accurate from EY's perspective. These will all be immaterial, but the issue you have if you're kind of always carrying forward a number that's a few pound out, it will always be a few pound out. So with the knowledge that obviously we had the disclaimed audit opinions for previous years, and this will be the first set of accounts in a few years that will be subject to an audit, we saw it as a good opportunity to actually take the time and correct those throughout. So you'll see a lot of reference, little asterisks and comments, asterisks next to numbers, and a comment on the bottom just explaining what it's about. So there have been some very minor changes since sort of one or two since the draft was published, which the finance team have identified and will communicate to the auditors. But it's they're not significant numbers. It's just as the final postings were made, we'd realised there's been a sort of a few errors. So they're happy to answer any questions about them.
Thank you very much. And I think, you know, for me, correcting those errors is you know, prudent and sensible. It means we've got a nice clean set of numbers to be working forwards with. So thank you, sir. Does anyone have any questions, please? Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is actually the fourth time I think I've seen these figures in various committees or full council. So we went to town on this in overview and scrutiny, so I'm not really going to add much here, but the point does need to be made, which I think I made last time, is if we go to page 79, just looking at the size of the variance in there, that is, as I expressed before, of great concern to me, particularly looking at employee costs. the worry I have, if you compare those to what we reviewed, I believe in the February full council where we set the annual budget, and there's such a sizable movement in there. And my concern going forward, particularly for the new Section 151 officer, is that when we have figures presented to us in future, what level of confidence do we really actually have that there can be such a, the overall, if you look at the bottom, the overall variance there is 22% on what is a relatively small budget in corporate terms. So I have concerns about that. I mean, all I can do is say I have concerns about that, but I think that's something we need to monitor going forward, because I've never seen variance of quite that scale in this council before in the previous 5 years when we had that. So, I mean, that's the point, the main point I think we made, and which, I mean, there are other minor ones, but I won't reiterate those again today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to comment on that at all?
Yeah, so I think I know we've had previous discussions around this in other committees. I think for the inclusion in the financial statements, they're included as almost a statement of fact. So as in, these are the results for the year. So it's but that's kind of the reason of why they're in the financial statement. So it's kind of a kind of a factual number that can be read in that sense. So.
I mean, obviously, the decisions we make as a council are based on the figures we have in front of us, and obviously we have to make those decisions based on estimates going forward. Clearly, if we thought we had more money in the kitty, then it may well enable us to actually done more work than we perhaps thought we could have done in the past. So that's probably one of the main impacts of that. But anyway, that's the point I've made. I've labelled it before anyway, but I thought it had to have another airing here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Fletcher?
Sorry, this is really. It's on page 78 in item 5.2. We talked about the appeals against the setting of business rates, and the point makes the valuation of the agency who hear these appeals has gone back and block, increasing the risk of the council movement down large refunds. Sounds rather scary. One is presumably the valuation of the agency as a government.
Thank you.
The council has an earmarked reserve for business rate evaluations and appeals, so the risk to the authority in terms of the bottom line is measured or contained within that earmarked reserve. But obviously the number of appeals does fluctuate. You would expect it to increase at times of recession as businesses look at their input costs and whether there is savings to be realised. But it is an executive agency of government, and it's down to its own capacity and resourcing to, in terms of the performance standards it meets, in terms of its ability to determine appeals. But we do have an earmarked reserve. They can through government, but not by the district council.
Thank you. Mr. Platten, I believed you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to build on Councillor Cushing's point, I too was struck by the pretty high variance, and what was going through my mind looking at that was why is it? You know, I take the point, it's a statement of fact. But if you get through this process to the end where you've got a 22% variance, then we probably should be asking ourselves, why has that happened? And how can you ensure that you kind of sort out your planning and forecasting or whatever it is to ensure that that variance is much smaller? I mean, it's quite surprising. I recognise it's from a relatively small figure compared to stuff like government, but it's still a pretty big variance. So maybe there is a message there around looking at why and planning and what the kind of mitigating actions might be to ensure that you kind of limit that variance in future. So that was one observation. Second one, just picked up on, and this might be one of those ones that's at the interface between operational risk and corporate risk, but the points on page 85 about temporary accommodation, where it looks like getting cash back from central government is proving challenging. I was looking at that thinking, well, what's the scale? And is that an issue that warrants fleshing out a bit more than it currently is in the risk. I had a look at the risk approach to that. So I think it's CR26. So it may not be an issue, but it just struck me as something, well, I didn't get a sense of the scale and whether it's something that is of concern. But we can maybe come on to that when we look at risk. Thank you.
No, I think it's a very, certainly housing and, providing housing is a really big problem, and the amount we get back from central government is not very much. But I will defer to the chief exec who's ready to answer your questions a bit fully.
I accept the principle that a 22% variance on the budget of this size is something that we do need to understand. I would, obviously it's a positive variance rather than a negative one. I'd be more worried if we were at 22% over at year end rather than in deficit at the year end rather than positive in terms of position. 40% of that increase or that variance relates to additional income, which is also a positive position for us to be in terms of managing income that is due to the authority. I think we do need to understand the variance around the staffing figure, and that's something that I will ask Mr. McCullum and Mr. King to look at further. That's the line item that is most concerning. I think the income obviously is variable. Has been a focus in terms of rent reviews in our assets. That continues. We were up on car parking income last year, and that's a positive position to be, because many of this authority's much of this authority's budget is on discretionary services around tourism infrastructure, public conveniences, so things that we don't have to provide but are important in terms of our local economy and supporting jobs and business success in the wider economy. And we can't charge for many of those services directly in terms of access to the beaches, high amenity cleansing of promenade areas, town centres, public gardens, and public conveniences, which we don't have to provide. So most of those services are, the cost of providing those services are met by car parking income. So that is an important area of focus for us as an authority in terms of a user pay principle.
Did you want to come back on that? You look like you wanted to come back to follow up.
No, it's only, I understand that. I think that, as Councillor Cushing said, there's something about it, if there is that surplus, then you might just redirect it. So there's something, something about just to do exactly those kind of things you were talking about. And then there was this might be a bit too detailed, but the temporary accommodation point and that I mentioned around the costs of that from government and
So I'm happy to answer that question as well. So over the last 3 years, the cost of temporary accommodation in the district council sector, it's our largest cost pressure. There have been significant rises in the number of Section 21 eviction notices served in many areas. Some of that is post-COVID, in people have taken out of use long-term private rental and moved to holiday accommodation or lettings, particularly in districts like this. Other changes to the costs of being a small landlord, which might increase further, possibly, if some of the media reports are to be believed, in the future, means that people have got out of being small landlords, so that our stock of private rented properties in the district has declined. And so those presentations have increased, and we have a duty during assessing people as a statutory homeless, and whether we have a duty to accommodate, we place them in temporary accommodation. And that often means bed and breakfast. Over the last 5 years, the authority has recognised the fact that we aren't able to control those costs, and so we've bought street-based properties, sometimes with government grant, to address that deficit, and that has seen the numbers of people housed securely in self-contained accommodation increase, and we can claim, or the people that are placed can claim housing benefit for that, whereas we can't get that money back through subsidy in terms of bed and breakfast accommodation. So I think there is some data that the strategic housing manager has referred to recently, where perhaps that cost has peaked, and we are beginning to see an improvement in that position. And I believe that's reflected in the corporate risk register moving forward. But it's the biggest pressure that we face as a district council at this time.
I think it's fair to say it's one of the biggest pressures on a lot of authorities nationally. It's not just us. Thank you. Any more questions on the report? Oh, sorry.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, just going back to the significant variance on employee costs for the year of the report of £1.6 million on employee costs. If I draw your attention to 6.5, the first bullet point on page 80, that was made up of a mixture of vacant posts and changes in the funding requirement of the LGPS scheme. The latter is influenced by factors outside of the council's control in terms of Ogden rates and how and base interest rates affect the amount of contribution we as a council need to make to our pension liabilities versus the stock market. So that's an element. I don't have the breakdown between that and the vacant posts. The vacant posts are something that we are looking at in fine detail as part of the 2026-27 budget cycle, as well as in-year savings, where we find we're able to delete those posts and redirect funds towards other council activities.
Thank you. So it looks like you've got a good eye on that for the future. Any more questions, please? Okay, I'm just going to have a quick check of what I had marked. I had questions about. Okay. Just a question of clarification, and I'm sure this is probably very small for most people understand it, but I just wanted to check this componentization on page 107. So when we're talking about things like that, we're talking about things like the pier, I'm assuming. Would that be correct?
I would have to check what we're the sort of underlying finance records to see what's been referred to there.
I was just curious because I was just trying to understand how the different makeup of the figures was, and I just thought, is that something like the pier?
I believe it is, and coast defences. So I think this is the issue that has been raised historically through external audit and was subject to advice last year, if not the year before. And I think that if you have an asset that you routinely repair, so I think it's unusual for us to have, for a district council to have such challenge over this. I think it largely relates to highway authorities. So you have a road which you then improve by redressing or surface dressing or something, but the actual, but you might do that before the asset would reach its natural end of life. And so you would then extend the end of life. And so I think because of our pier and because of our coast defences, that was the issue that was raised. But I think it was an external audit issue a couple of years ago.
Okay. Now, I was just curious when I was reading about it. I thought, I don't fully understand this and I would like to. Were questions? We seem to have on page 127, or page 53 of this particular report, depending on which number you're looking at, down at the bottom here, the other items for which the cash effects are investing or cash flows. Can you just enlighten me a little bit more about what that actually means, please? Seemed to be a big change between the 2 years, and I just wondered how and why.
I think we'll have to revert to you, the committee on that particular item. Yeah.
Lovely. If you could take that away as an action and just come back, I just think it's, you know, it's a sizable difference and I'd like to understand it, please.
Yes.
It might be, I don't know, we will check and come back to you. It might be to do with repayment of any surplus COVID grants that were paid to us. There was a need to pay back those within a time frame. So, but we'll check and come back to you.
Thank you. Was that one? So I'm just. Was one here on page 145. But I'm assuming that's to do with now. I'm understanding that we've been doing some, from what you said a few minutes ago, we've been doing some recent more valuations, and that's why that's jumped. Would that be fair to say? At the bottom of the page, carried at historical cost, and in the first line we had it 19, then it went to 12, now we're up to 26. Is that to do with the fact that we've been revaluing things?
So there'll be the way in which assets are valued will be dependent on the stage of construction is one of the reasons. So for example, if we take a coastal scheme, the way in which that will be valued before it's brought into use will be different to how it's valued when it's completed. So certain assets will be carried at historical cost or at cost until they reach certain points, which is in line with our accounting policy. So it may be that we have new assets or assets that have completed construction and they now carry a different value compared to their historical cost. But in terms of the valuations, we obviously have a revaluation policy, which we have our assets regularly revalued, which took place this year as well. And they're usually cyclical. It depends on the type of asset. Some of them will be cyclical revaluations every X amount of years, depending on what they are, or certain assets get revalued every year. For example, investment properties, they get revalued every year, and things like car parks and things like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Last question from me, promise. Page 154. I wondered whether there was just a wrong date there or whether I was missing something in my understanding. But if you look at the dates on the balance sheet, the fair value, and then the balance sheet and then the fair value, you've got 25 3 times. It's just a small, but I thought, am I not understanding this? Am I missing something? Right, any other questions on that report? In which case, I believe we just had to note it. Everyone happy to note the report? Thank you. So we move on to the monitoring officer's annual report, which is notably easier to read in number of pages. Took me quite a while to get through that financial report. Councillor Cushing, you said something interesting because I thought we were trying to stop the number of reports that went to overview and scrutiny and to GRAC on finance. Did I understand that correctly? No? I thought we were trying to not have the repeat of reports going through finance, through overview and scrutiny and GRAC? Oh, right. Okay, that's fine. Apparently some have to go to both through regulatory reasons. That's fine. I just wanted to check that we weren't. Right. Does anyone have any questions, please, on the monitoring officer's annual report? Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Page 175, talk about freedom of information requests, which I see is monitoring roughly around, I think, 5733. So it's averaging out probably about 2 every working day, if my maths is sort of correct. That sounds like a bit of an industry in itself. I mean, do we actually learn anything from those? Is there anything that could be done in order to mitigate them being sent? Is there any themes? Is there anything that we can draw out that useful for the council?
It is a bit of an industry in itself, in one sense. We have a statutory obligation. People have a right to ask questions under the Freedom of Information Act, and they don't necessarily even have to say that it's a Freedom of Information Act question. They can ask for information, and we're required sometimes to look at it that way. We do have a publication scheme which we advertise on the website, so people can go directly to go and ask to go and find that information out themselves. Unfortunately, we don't have a neat 2 every day. Depending sometimes on what's going on in the news, we'll have a glut of questions in a certain area. And I think there's been some university research undertaken recently in regard to Freedom of Information Act requests and how they are used by particular people, and sometimes we get persistent complainants, and they'll use the Freedom of Information Act process to further ask questions, and sometimes we get vexatious requests as well. I don't know if that answers. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Platt. You had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was almost exactly the same point I was planning on raising. I mean, thanks for putting the report together. Impressive piece of work, and that is a lot of questions to be dealing with under FOI. Just on making the connection back to how it might be possible to kind of head off some of those in future potentially. I was just wondering if the feedback loop into potentially, for example, the project management framework of what's going on in the landscape in terms of people's questions, and recognizing that some of those might be vexatious or lobby groups or whatever. How might you, is it possible to look at that landscape and go, okay, is there anything in the policy space or whatever we're doing that we can adjust to make sure we're less likely to get these? It's quite easy. I've done a lot of FOIs, and it's quite easy to do them in a bit of a bubble. Yeah, we just got to get through this. Yeah, but if you can get in the helicopter and look across, it might be possible to head off some of those FOIs in future. So it's just an open question about whether there's an opportunity there to head some of them off in future by taking a step back and looking at how you might feed into things like the project management framework or whatever to reduce the likelihood, as far as you're able to, of getting more in future. Thank you.
I think that it's so difficult because people don't ask neat Freedom of Information Act requests, and sometimes part of it will need us to go to one department, part of it will need to go to another. But what I can say about how the council deals with the FOI requests, we've got really good statistics in regard to responding to them within the time that the Information Commissioner requires. And we have, as is in my report, very little in the way of appeals to the Information Commissioner and findings against us.
Thank you. Councillor Boyle.
Just on the same topic, really. How does that compare year on year? Are the Freedom of Information Act requests increasing year by year, or are they sort of relatively level? I know it's not a hill on it.
I think this year was less than the previous year, but more than the year before that. It does fluctuate, but it's always, it generally sees an increase.
And I think it's worth noting, it's not just those, I mean, it's subject access requests as well that you have to deal with. Those take quite a while to deal with, don't they? I think it's worth noting, I don't know, it didn't say in your report, one of the questions I had was the Ombudsman had upheld 3 complaints this year, but only 1 requiring some kind of, and I just wondered how those figures compared with the previous year. I'm looking on page 177, the report.
Yes, and there's an appendix, I think, attached to that.
Oh,
Page 186.
186, thank you.
I haven't got the figures in front of me from the previous year, but from my memory, it's a very similar landscape to the previous year and last year's monitoring officer report that I brought to you.
Lovely, thank you.
Chair, sorry.
Thank you.
I think last year there were 2 upheld. What I would say, because North Norfolk District Council is one of the pilot authorities with the LGSCO for a change in the code of practice, and so we are sort of the forefront with a number of other authorities at looking at how we deal with our complaints. We have gone back to the LGSCO on one of these because effectively their response was we're not investigating it. And they appear to have had a slight change. So I think the one that says, it's about the 5th line down, that says injustice remedied during organisation's complaint process. I think that's the one where the LGSCO said we're not investigating it, but effectively we're upholding it because you upheld it. And so if we uphold it and the person still goes, so if we uphold that individual's complaint and put a remedy in place, and they go to the LGSCO all the same, the LGSCO say we're not investigating it, but effectively because you have upheld it, we've upheld it. And so that, I think, is probably a change that has led to an slight increase in our numbers. I think we are much more robust now with our complaint handling process. And so, yeah, we are regularly monitoring these through our complaints handling processes, as Officer Blatch has already outlined to you in an earlier response.
I think too, I mean, even from a councillor's perspective on looking in on it, the number, how the complaints process is handled here now compared to several years ago, it's a huge improvement. So, okay, so does anybody have any more questions? No. So all we have to do is review and note. So we duly note. Everyone happy to say we duly note the report? Thank you. So we move to item 12, the cyber risk management policy. Page 199. Is anyone wishing to speak to this, or do we go straight to questions? Does anybody have any questions on this? Yes, Councillor Fletcher.
Well, this strikes me as this is the cyber risk threat. It's a nice on the left-hand column.
Sorry, I think you've gone into the risk report.
I'm sorry, I didn't want.
That's all right. No, that's fine. Don't worry, we'll come to that in a moment. So you have your moment then. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I thought this was quite slender, considering what a risk cyber was to many organisations, and I wondered if it had been sufficiently fleshed out. That was one question. Looking at the risk register, it says we haven't got, there's no backfilling of the IT infrastructure manager. And I don't see that role on the list of roles and responsibilities of this policy. So I just would like a little bit of clarification on both those points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Anyone able to answer those questions?
I may be able to help on the first point. So on the first point, in terms of it is quite a light document, deliberately so. We don't go into the details of how we protect against cyber attack, because effectively it would be like telling you put the information out there and that allows you to be bypassed. So this is very deliberately a statement of policy about how we manage those cyber risks. It doesn't go into the details of the actual defences and processes that we've got in place. So it is about the management of cyber risk rather than the details of how we control it.
Okay, so I totally get what you're saying. Thank you very much. How can we be assured that you have all the elements in place, even though they're not fleshed out? For example, password protection. The simple things that we're supposed to consider. I mean, it just looks skimpy, which is fine, but I can understand why. But have you got every single vertebra in place?
So
the
behind this are other internal documents that set out our approach. In addition to that, and I can't remember the name of it, I'm afraid. I don't know whether the chief exec can remember, but we do an assessment. Sorry? No, we've done the cyber risk assessment tool. So it's a government run tool. So you feed all your information in, and I think they come back with with recommendations. So we do an online tool that basically enables us to check our policies and processes. It's online, but it's assessed by an individual who come back and say, where are you with this? So we are undertaking tests and tools in the background to make sure that that we are dealing with cyber risk in an appropriate manner, and that we've thought of all the elements of it to put protection in place. And as often Officer Blatcher said, we are compliant with the Public Services Network code. So you have to work quite hard to achieve those compliance levels, and you have to be able to demonstrate that you do have those protections and security measures in place. So from a reassurance point of view, corporate leadership team have had papers recently from the strategic ICT manager, basically saying this is where our tool assessment is. These are our next steps. So internally, we are considering that at a management level. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your second question, although I did think I probably couldn't answer it.
So the additional post that sorry, can you say what it was, the title?
The title in the policy is Strategic ICT Manager, and on the risk register, it just talks about the IT infrastructure manager. Is that the same thing? And is there a vacancy there?
No, so we restructured. So we had a review, and there may be a need to cross-reference, and I'll have to take that away. But we had an East of England Local Government Association consultant look at our IT staffing arrangements last year, which was reported to council. He concluded that we had a very strong ICT team in place, but that there were 3 team leaders or service team managers within the service, but no single IT manager. So we restructured the team and with an internal appointment to have a senior IT or a strategic IT manager, and that person was asked to restructure the 3 teams into 2, and that process is ongoing. We've made the appointment into the strategic IT manager post, I will need to check the job description or titles used in the other document to ensure that they are, that is clear.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks to whoever put the paper together. I appreciate it and totally understand the point about not being able to discuss the details of this. My background is in national infrastructure risk management, and I just wanted to share one thing from that that might be relevant. Understand entirely if you can't answer it in detail, but things like protecting the national food supply chain and the country from animal disease outbreaks, we would run kind of scenarios, exercises, practical exercises to, imagining a scenario where that thing actually you're concerned about actually happens. And I didn't spot any of that. There's lots of sort of activities and like a nominated individual to take stuff forward. But if the impact of a cyber attack happening is as significant as the risk register suggests, and I totally get that, then that kind of running an exercise to see how the council would react in practice might make sense. But totally understand how you might want to talk about that in this forum. But if that's something that's not being considered, then it might be worth doing. Thanks.
So we do a lot of, as you would imagine, a lot of business continuity planning for all of our service areas. In terms of the position around ICT, that's no exception. And obviously we do a lot of activity around system backup, disaster recovery, etc. So there are regular testing in place of our ability to respond to a disruptive event around ICT.
Well, going for keeping going during a disruptive event in the committee room. Thank you. It's all right. It happens to us all from time to time. Councillor Cushing, I believe you had a question you wanted to ask.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. When I worked in corporate world, in terms of passwords, the system I had probably to have to change every 2 months. I'm surprised that we don't have a similar system here. Given that password vulnerability is probably one of the main entries, I think I might be right in saying Marks and Spencers were undone because they got into the system via somebody's password.
So I think in terms of that, passwords are part of a number of authentication processes that you go through here. So for me, when I log on, I don't just put my password in the morning. I have to do another factor of authentication in order to do that. And they do encourage the regular changing of passwords. They also there is also a check to make sure passwords aren't too simple or repetitious, etc. So I think it's something we can certainly take away and raise as to why that position exists. But I think the position is very much along the lines of there are a number of factors of authentication in place, including an additional factor if you're not logging on via our network here. And so from that point of view, you would have to work very hard to be able to get onto our network without just on a password basis.
Area of expertise for me, but I just raise it just a curious discrepancy. That's all, which I just have you thought about a type question. That's all.
I was going to say, when I worked for bigger IT companies, yes, there was a big focus on changing the password, but it's a long time since I worked for them, but that was it. I didn't have any more authentications to get in through. It's probably changed by now. Anyway, right. Does anyone have any more questions on that? In which case, I believe we need to review a note, and we haven't really got any recommendations to go to council on that one. No? recommendations today. Right. Thank you very much. Really noted. So now we move on to the corporate risk register, which some of you have been desperate to get onto already. So who would like to start, please?
Sorry, I'm in one. We sort of brief anyway. This.
Somebody like to comment on that, please?
So I've explained the process that we went through in terms of having the East of England Local Government Association come in and offer a view. That their view was informed by engagement with the staff team, and it was very clear from the position that was adopted that we would seek to make a more senior position within the team, but then look for restructuring and redeployment of the team moving forward in order to strengthen their performance, not as an efficiency. No money was taken out of the budget for that service area. It might be that there's a difference of opinion between the service manager and management as to the need for an additional resource. But I have to say, this is a very clear example of where the government perceives a benefit in moving towards a unitary form of local government. Because if they're saying, if it's being suggested here that a small organisation isn't able to have multiple officers around a complaints officer and a dedicated cybersecurity officer, you would see that in a larger organisation, and there would be management systems and structures in place which allowed a cascade of those responsibilities. So I think we move into quite, dangerous territory in terms of be careful what you wish for here, in terms of, bigger is necessarily beautiful. So I think it's something that we need to manage. I think it's something that we may need to reflect on further. I think the fact that there's been a high level of staff completing the course around cyber awareness, I think if there is a further gap or a perceived gap in terms of our capacity to have a dedicated post rather than specifying that responsibility with an existing post, that's something we might need to consider further.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of points. The first was looking at May, which we didn't have a chance to see till just now. There was one risk that has gone up. That was the not achieving the net zero target. And we didn't have a chance to reflect on that at the time. Now, looking at it now in August, thankfully it hasn't progressed, but could there have been any issues for us not having a chance to actually review the risk register at the time? I think this might be the only one where the risk had increased in May.
Okay, so
Thank you.
this is a really good example, Councillor Holiday, of issues that in terms of our risk register. So, it's something that the recent audit of environmental policy and strategy did comment upon, and we did ask Ms. Sharman to reflect on the score in terms of urgency, or because there were two, I think there were two highly graded recommendations or urgent recommendations. And as a corporate leadership team, we questioned what that urgency or priority was, given that it wasn't involving a risk, you know, in terms of life and limb. It wasn't involving a risk in terms of the council entering into a major contract, and it wasn't around recovering monies that were due to the authority. So in scale of risk, that audit, those audit recommendations we did challenge, and Ms. Sharman said that it was around, you know, this was a corporate policy of the council that hadn't been refreshed or updated for some period of time, and therefore, you know, it was right through an audit process to highlight that we deviated from our position. You know, there's a national debate, isn't there, at the present time around the relative importance of net zero actions and interventions. I think there's a political difference across the political parties nationally in this space relative to the carbon emissions that the UK generates relative to developing or emerging economies. And it's right that we perhaps lead by example and seek to improve our position relatively. But if we are, you know, damaging ourselves economically in terms of jobs and investment, and we're buying oil and gas from somewhere else rather than using our own stocks, is that something we have a view on? And I think as the context in which this authority operates with LGR, with devolution, where does net zero sit in our relative priorities? That's a matter for you as elected members, to which your officers have to respond. There is a debate about the relative priority of that issue. We haven't abandoned our net zero objectives. We've increased the number of electric vehicles that the authority is using for site visits within the district. We continue to invest in you know, thermal efficiency in terms of the energy performance of our key buildings. But what we have said, or what we have seen in the terms of the issue that Mr. Platten raised around our stock of temporary accommodation, is that as we've purchased additional units and our asset base has increased, so our improvement on our net zero journey has somewhat stalled or been compromised. And there are also choices which Mr. Hems is having to weigh up in terms of delivering an affordable leisure development at Fakenham Leisure Centre. If it is going to be, you know, net zero or carbon neutral, there is an additional financial pressure that needs to be met. And so there is a real choice there as to you have a leisure centre which is better than the leisure centres we have at the moment, but not at that very, very highest level. Or you might take the view that it's not affordable and you can't provide that level of amenity. And that's a choice which it presents itself to us both at an officer and member level. So I recognise that it was read and it might be uncomfortable for us to have to face up to that. But I think the position in August probably better reflects where the corporate leadership team felt we existed or sat in the context of what was actually a corporate risk. I don't know if it's a corporate risk. It's a corporate risk in terms of not achieving what we set out to achieve, but in the scale of other things that we are managing and balancing, it was felt that we could downgrade the risk. But some of these things are subjective.
Sorry.
Sorry, I accept that point. And I do know that the team have redrafted the environmental policy and it is going to come back to members before Christmas. I don't know whether it's in October, but it will be in November if not.
I take your point. There's something there about the length of time between seeing the risk register. Maybe there's something about I don't know, we need to investigate it with those responsible about if something changes and goes into a red zone between our meetings of actually reviewing it, whether it can be highlighted as part of the report that comes to us. I don't know. We'll have to talk and see if that can be investigated.
Can I ask another question? I'll put the microphone on this time.
Could I just, before you go into that one, I had one other point on the cyber. I think we had, yeah, the cyber risk, sorry. And that was, I wanted to say, could we make a recommendation to the IT team? Because when I first got the messages saying I needed to do the training, I thought they were a scam. And so I was ignoring them and deleting them. So, and I rang up IT and said, excuse me, I keep getting these. Are these actual courses? And they went, yes, they are. I went, well, then I'll do them. And I wonder whether there's more people out there in the same situation. So I think maybe we need to get a message out from the IT team to everyone to respond when they get their training courses.
So the IT team use so you're referring to things that come through not from North Norfolk District Council, they come from a different titled thing, and obviously we all should be aware of things that come saying please click on this link and do that activity. And I've raised that very issue myself with the IT team, but it's because we use an external provider to deliver that deliver that software. So yes, I think we can certainly ask about strengthening that message that these courses are coming out, because they come out, understandably, they come out for people to do and be delivered, but they're just from that company. And I think there is a potential risk that you could receive an email and think, oh, it's from so and so, I'll click on it, and it could be malware. So that pre-warning by the IT team might well assist. So we'll take that away and feed it through.
I just think that way we might get more compliance. And I think with the risk and the state of it and the way people attack, bodies such as councils, we just need to get more compliance. That was all. Thank you.
I had a question. I can't see a corporate risk for cost homelessness and the financial consequences of. Is that because it's an operational risk rather than a corporate? You just described it as one of the biggest risks that we had, and I may be missing it.
I thought I'd seen one somewhere, but excuse me when I look. Sorry?
I took that more to mean local plan delivery rather than homelessness.
While we look, shall we ask Councillor Cushing to deliver his question, and then Councillor Cushing.
I go to page 241, which is housing delivery targets not met. I have to say the RAG ratings on here surprised me, given that the pressures we have on delivery of these. I'm sure the chief executive probably have his fingertips the number of houses we do build in a year, but as far as I'm aware, regardless of who's running this council, I don't think we've got, it's more to be around about 300 mark in terms of the new houses. So we've got a new plan which is looking at over 550. I don't think many of us would challenge whether that's actually deliverable or not, let alone the government's fast school over 900 target as well. So in light of all that, we've got a sort of residual risk, which is down at amber. So I just question whether that is really a true reflection of the current position.
Well, this is a very complex area, isn't it? So the draft new local plan that is moving towards adoption does reflect the previous government's expectations that we delivered a higher number than we have historically, which I think has been about 485. So that's already gone up from that position. But we were at the end of our previous local plan, and many of those sites had been built out. I think the only large one that hadn't been out was the Fakenham urban extension. And we obviously intervened as a council there to lead the delivery of the roundabout on the bypass to open up that land for development. The grade. So obviously, since the election of the Labour government in July 2024, they've pushed the number of houses that should be delivered up to 932. We've had discussions in this chamber that, you know, that figure is highly unlikely to be achieved, in that it's a notional national distribution. It doesn't reflect the availability of, particularly in this district, of utilities. So, you know, significant capacity constraints on water supply, UK power network infrastructure in this district, and that's without moving to the issues of a delivery, viable delivery, nutrient neutrality, biodiversity net gain, and any expansion of hospital and medical facilities. Because of our aged population, we do have headroom in some of our schools, but that doesn't necessarily match up with where most growth is proposed. The position of adopting the new local plan means that we have a degree of confidence that a number of sites are now coming forward for development. There's outline applications in respect of a couple of schemes in Cromer, that would deliver large numbers. They're on site at a site in Stalham, and there are conversations ongoing around a series of other sites which are listed or proposed for allocation within the local plan. So I think the amber status reflects that we will have a current plan, that we are engaging with developers in respect of a number of schemes, but those wider context of the 932 and the infrastructure capacity remains an issue for us. The target score is amber. Yeah. Well, the likelihood, the inherent risk score we could only get is I don't think we'd say 5 by 5. So the residual risk score in terms of the delivery of the local plan would be 15, and then we would like to get to 8.
Where we are with that now, and when we might be able to close that one out.
So some work's been done around. Currently, we have one procurement officer employed, and some work's been done to sort of assess the impact of that. So any large procurements in the meantime have been facilitated by an external company, so to ensure compliance from that point of view. So we're in a position now where we have started to develop some documentation that is required for us to go out to tender, and conversations will be taking place with sort of neighbouring authorities to assist us in that process to make sure when we go live with those tenders that we are compliant with the new Procurement Act. So I think at this stage we're aiming to retain the service in-house, but we're just making sure that due to sort of the risk of their any sort of breaches in that policy could carry fines. So we're just being extra careful that it's done at the right pace. And if there are any, if we do need that external help just to get us there, I think that's what we're seeking at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Platten.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So 3 points, I guess, a suggestion, a question, and possibly a challenge. So suggestion for some of the risks, I think it might help to be a little bit clearer in terms of the right-hand column that talks about status on timing, what's happening next, particularly if it's something that's kind of higher level risk. So risk 2, risk 9, risk 43, I understand why people might not want to put more specific wording in for what's going to happen next, but where it's possible, I think that would be super helpful, just to understand that this isn't sort of, that next step isn't going into a black hole, something's going to happen by a certain time, if we're able to say that. The specific question was around risk 34, which we've talked a little bit about already, so net zero. I just spotted that there was a reference there to needing to offset emissions. So I don't know, you know, the technicalities here, but if that attracts a cost, then perhaps it needs referencing in there as a financial kind of consequence of the risk being realised. And then the challenge, and forgive me, I don't come to this building very often, as often as the colleagues on this committee do. So I'm sure you'd cover this a lot in terms of the unitary authority kind of activity. And I see that there's a risk in here about that, but it's framed about capacity of the people to cope with the workload for moving towards unitary, you know, that whole sort of process. And what was going through my mind is things that happen in this kind of situation are around staff turnover, potentially service delivery issues. And it's whether, I guess the challenge, it's probably too strong a word, maybe it's a question, is whether you're satisfied that the other risks that you've captured here that are in the corporate risk log sufficiently provide you with the space to drill into some of those specific issues around stuff like, I don't know, staff retention and that can crop up through any kind of significant potential change, and particularly service delivery. So it just struck me it was framed in here as a point around capacity of being able to do the work about potential unitary stuff, whereas just taking a step back, open question, do we need to unpack that a bit and just make sure that the risks elsewhere cover the things that might crop up in that space? Thank you.
So in terms of each of those points, in terms of whether we can put any time horizon in the right-hand column, that's something we can take away. In terms of your very astute observation around net zero, yes, there are penalties that we're going to kick in, I think, in 2028 in respect of our compliance with targets set by the previous government around energy performance of our property assets, such that if we didn't meet those thresholds, there would have been a tariff to pay. So you're right in identifying that. I don't know if it is still there or whether it came out, whether we should have had the reference, whether it was ever there or whether we have removed it because of the time horizons that were talked about. And there, you know, that's a reality in terms of some things the authority may choose not to do if local government reorganisation it comes about. In terms of the score around local government reorganisation, well, you know, did any of us expect to happen what happened last Friday, where both the Secretary of State and the Minister of State have now changed? This was at a moment in time. We, as I say, it's dynamic. We are updating it quarterly. So it was around capacity to get to this stage at this time in terms of submission of a joint proposal to government by the end of September. We then anticipated that there would have been a period where the minister and the civil servant team reflected on the quality of our submission relative to others submitted in Norfolk. If we had mirrored the position in Surrey, the minister would have then gone out for a statutory consultation, probably of 7 or 8 weeks. We'd made representation to his civil servants that we felt our communities would be placed at a disadvantage if that consultation ran over the Christmas New Year period, which it did this year in terms of the white paper and the expressions of interest to be in the devolution priority programme. And then we would have expected the government to come to a view as to a unitary model, probably in March of next year. And that was the timeline that we were working to. And then we would have probably looked at establishing joint implementation teams for shadow elections in 2027 and the new authorities coming into being in 2028. It might be, we don't know, that timetable now alters because of the issues within government last Friday. They may keep their foot to the floor and say, no, we're going to continue with the time frame. They might do that for all 21 county areas. They might just do it for the 6 county areas that are in the devolution priority programme, depending on the bandwidth of the department and the ministerial team. The issues around workforce, we did anticipate, and that was one of the reasons why there is the advisory piece of work which we've commissioned during this audit plan year around workforce strategy and learning development. As chief executive, I want this council's very loyal and committed staff to be in the strongest position possible to retain their jobs, compete for new opportunities, because new opportunities will be presented for some people in the context of local government reorganisation. And so that's why we felt that piece around workforce strategy and learning and development was important. And we look forward to receiving that in due course. At the present time, our recruitment position in the recent past over this summer has been significantly improved relative to where we were perhaps 12 or 18 months ago. We now have full complement of staff within environmental health. We've made appointments into senior positions that have become vacant from good quality fields. I do think that the overall market for employment is tightening. And so perhaps we are seen more attractive to how we were 18 or 24 months ago. And that's notwithstanding the potential for local government reorganisation. So we absolutely need to focus on this. I'm very comfortable now we've got to the submission stage of the document, decision to be made by full council on the 24th of September, that we revisit this risk again, whether the narrative is right. But in the last 6 months, it has very much been on our corporate capacity to deliver. And I think we've met that challenge. We did scale back, the cabinet did scale back the number of objectives they had in their corporate plan delivery plan for the annual action plan from 46 last year to 30 this year. I don't think we've lost our ambition in terms of what we would hope to achieve. But we've had to ask ourselves difficult questions about capacity and cut our cloth accordingly.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and totally understand all of that. Just one final observation on it. It sounds like there'll be a time, probably in spring or something, where it's where things are clearer on what civil service is saying, what government departments are saying, where it makes sense to take a step back and go, okay, depending on their response, what does that mean? Obviously at a wider level, but specifically on corporate risk. So at the moment, I understand why it's capacity. Thank you for that explanation. But I'm just thinking you can see quite quickly with counter proposals coming in that might have an impact on a lot of other things, and it's good maybe just to take a step back and go to, is the way that we're managing this through risk and other avenues that are kind of optimal.
Yeah, we believe there'll be 3 submissions for Norfolk outlining different opportunities for 1, 2 or 3 unitaries. The debate as to the merits of those needs to be assessed by government. They will then undertake some form of statutory consultation to give the Secretary of State a degree of cover and validity in terms of the responses they receive, and then an announcement will be made. And at that stage, we will be in a different cadence in terms of the workload. There'll be a different focus. We'll have certainty as to the nature of the arrangements that will be put in place, and services will have to be built from the bottom up in terms of structures, focus, staffing, policy development, and we need to continue business as usual and responsibly close down existing authorities in standing up and the vesting day to be safe and legal for any new authorities at the time they come into being. You know, this, however, whatever view you have about local government reorganisation, this is not a quick fix. It's a 5-year transition. You know, once a decision is made, you then have to work towards that in terms of your implementation plan, both in terms of shadow authorities or implementation teams, depending on the model that is adopted. Vesting day is reached, but we're not going to bring all of the systems together, all of the contracts together, you know, waste, IT systems, the procurement, the natural life of those existing contracts being novated and brought together. That's a big piece of work. It's probably a 5-year project plan.
Professor Hems.
Thank you. At the time that we discussed the local government reorganisation risk, we did talk about in CLT about the workforce implications. And at that time, we made the decision that there is already a people resources CR 024, which talks about the failure to retain and recruit adequately trained staff. We felt at that time that that covered the potential, because those impacts could come from anything. So I think it was important to us that we didn't duplicate risk, so that you hadn't got the same risk multiple times. So I think the feeling is that that is currently adequately reflected in CR 024.
Thank you. Does anyone have any more questions? I have a couple of quick ones. We look at the Sheringham Leisure Centre on page 222. It says this risk has been closed. We still have a page for it. In the progress update.
Yeah, I think that is.
Just needs taking out, maybe.
I think it's reported here because it will come out next time.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm looking at Dan. I think that was the decision we made because it was closed, and we've left it in so that you can see it as being closed.
Okay. I see that the Fakenham roundabout too can be removed. Everyone happy with them? Well, not removing the roundabout, obviously.
So only just gone in.
Yes.
So one of the things we're doing as a corporate leadership team is reviewing these risks on a regular basis. What we have provided some challenge back to the risk owners is around whether we're just perpetuating a risk because it's the same subject rather than the risk. So if you read the risk associated with the Sheringham Leisure Centre, the risk is associated with the failure of contractor or issues with the construction sector and consents not being given. The thing's built, so that risk. So we're trying to get much better at ensuring the risk. That's why we've got rid of some risks and introduced. So the Fakenham Leisure Centre and Sports Hub one originally said failure to obtain government funding. So we've closed that risk and we've introduced a new risk that reflects the construction phase of it. So I think there was a degree to which, because it said a title about coastal erosion or Fakenham Leisure Centre or whatever, it just kept on, but the risk had changed. So we're now closing risks and opening new ones where it's appropriate. So that's why you'll see some disappearing or being closed, but being replaced by revised risks.
Thank you. So we all agree that Bacon and Roundabout can. Okay. And the other recommendation was the introduction of a risk regarding domestic food waste collection. And I think that sounds imminently sensible. Going back to your question earlier, I don't remember whose question it was. We don't have one for homelessness. So I think maybe we should add one.
We'll certainly consider what that looks like because I hope some of those risks are identified as service level risks and therefore managed at a service level. And we'll have a conversation at the CLT, at a future CLT, about introduction of a wider risk around the impact of homelessness, and whether it's not covered adequately within other risks.
I think it's the cost and the, not being it's within our control to do anything about it.
So the MTFS is on there as a risk, and so any costs will be considered as part of that process.
They're commented it is on there as a risk and it is heavy risk. Any other comments on the? Okay. Sorry. Are we happy just to note the report? Thank you. The procurement exemptions register. It's a nil report, which brings us to the item of urgent business. So, would you be able to circulate these, please? I don't know whether I've got enough copies, but certainly the committee need a copy. I know a couple of officers have got them. Okay. Well, there's a couple more copies here I've just discovered. Couple more. Let's give you a second to read that. I will read it out in a moment because obviously if there is any member of the public watching online, they haven't had the opportunity to read this in advance of the meeting. Are people ready for me to proceed? So members will be aware that as members, we have a duty to look at best value. And as part of that, it's looking at the costs and making sure that the appropriate processes have been used to ensure we are protecting public money. And so I do not believe that has been done in this case of looking at LGR, particularly with the evidence that we have in front of us, included within this letter, but widely delivered by national media a couple of weeks ago. So I believe we as the audit committee are here to protect the council from such forces. And I believe, therefore, that we should be doing something about it. The question is whether you wish to join me in sending this as a joint letter from the entire audit committee, or whether I send this as the chair of the audit committee. So I will read the letter so that anyone listening or watching online knows what we're discussing. I write to ask the National Audit Office to undertake an investigation into the government's plans to reorganise local councils across the country. The background in summary is that councils in two-tier areas, those with district and county councils, have been instructed to bring forward proposals to abolish themselves and create new unitary councils. In many cases, at great speed, with short deadlines and with veiled threats of the consequences of non-compliance. There is a significant cost to already hard-pressed councils in undertaking this work. The cost, both in real expenditure on research, legal advice, specialised assessment, and in officer time, is significant. In Norfolk alone, the costs are estimated to be in excess of 2 million, of which 321,000 was directly funded by central government. The balance will have to come from already overstretched council funds, pushing some councils further into debt. It appears a significant part of the premise for the restructuring is that change will bring savings, which then support the provision and maintenance of valued local services. However, the BBC reported on the 29th of August that the government did not commission its own analysis of the cost of this reorganisation, described as the biggest reorganisation of councils in England for decades, and there is a link there to the BBC report. The Department of Housing, Communities and Local Government, it now appears, undertook no independent research and assessment of both costs and savings itself. It based its cost estimates on a 5-year-old report by the County Council Network. Since that time, costs at both tiers of local government have spiralled beyond recognition, particularly due to send and care provision for residents. The then Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, said a significant amount of money could be saved by merging councils in 21 areas into single authorities. The Audit Committee here at North Norfolk District Council and in many other parts of the country would question the validity of that statement. This is not the experience of other councils such as Somerset and North Yorkshire, and current estimates in other areas indicate this is just not the case. I understand the role of the National Audit Office is to support Parliament in holding the government to account and to examine and report on the value for money of how public money has been spent. In updated analysis this year, the CCN reports that the reorganisation of local councils could cost 850 million over 5 years and deliver no savings. There appears to be a significant failing on the part of government to pursue the changes it has demanded in the structure of local government without a clear knowledge and understanding of both the costs and the potential savings which may be generated. Therefore, we are asking the NAO to urgently assess and review the government's decision to both incur its own costs, but also to instruct councils to pursue these changes in local government structure without first obtaining its own reliable evidence and information with regards to the costs of the changes and reliable knowledge of possible savings. We believe the government has acted precipitously and possibly negligently in this matter. With recent changes in government, now is the time to review earlier decisions. We all have a duty to protect how public money is spent. The public should expect no less from us. That ends the letter. I wonder if anyone's got any comments they would like to make, please. Councillor Fletcher.
In the paragraph, therefore I asked to give an AO it goes on asking NAO to urgently assess and review governance, but also to instruct councils to pursue these changes to local government structure without first obtaining its own reliable evidence. Should it not be, but also to instruct councils not to pursue these changes without first obtaining reliable evidence?
Yes, I suppose the way it was supposed to be structured, but hasn't been grammatically written correctly. I said the way it's been written grammatically is it isn't clear that I'm asking them to assess and review the government's decision to instruct councils, but it's not been written that way. And I think to instruct councils to not is clearer, but depends what other people think.
Well, not too long.
Yes. Any other comments? Councillor Holiday.
Is this going to be a national endeavour? You mentioned other councils and with your contacts, are other people doing the same? Can
They are.
you tell us how many?
At the moment, it's in its infancy. So at the moment, I'm not aware of how many have done it. There will be a motion coming to full council about it, asking. I'm debating whether we should have a motion to full council to ask our other colleagues in Norfolk to do it, or whether we should ask them to do it now. Because I think the sooner the better.
There seems some urgency to it, doesn't there?
Yes, I think there is.
Yeah, thank you. A great letter. And I saw the BBC piece when it came up live, and was surprised that there didn't appear to be a business case or an impact assessment that had been undertaken. Two observations on the letter. One, there's some figures in there, but I wonder if there are figures for Norfolk that can be included. That might add a bit of punch. And second, just sort of connected to that, to your point, there's kind of joining up with other district councils in Norfolk, and whether there's an opportunity to do that collectively. So yeah, thank you.
Certainly, with the panel's approval, I'm happy to write to the chairs of the audit committees and the council leaders to ask them consider joining with us as a matter of urgency in sending this off. I'm also attending next week the East of England audit committee chairs meeting, where we'll be talking about whether this letter can be taken forward at that point. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you for this. Yes, I'm happy to support the letter. I think you are quite right. It's the most momentous decision in 51 years for local government. If you look at the timescales that we have got this month to look at that, I mean, we look days, and we will not have the opportunity. We've got one option going forward from this authority, from the 6 district council authorities. We have no option really to look at the other two and put them side by side. And that's really what you want to do in order to come to a conclusion. But actually, the original point you make is, what's the purpose for doing this? Is it going to save money? Personally, like you, I don't think it'll save any money at all, whichever option you go down. I think it will end up in a position which is going to cost taxpayers far more to deliver services they have at the moment, and it'll be far less democratic.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main reasons for pursuing this.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Is it just a cost argument? There's no delivery, quality of delivery argument? Because that's what the statutory services.
At the moment,
me.
it's purely the fact that if we were to rush it rightly, the opposition, if we as an authority were to rush out and say, right, we're going to restructure X, Y, Z, and we're going to make huge savings doing that, you would expect us to come to you with figures and a back case to make that valid before you could consider whether or not you would go away with it. And the government is relying on a report that's 5 years old, and which the new report that has been done by the same body, they're choosing to ignore. I think it speaks volumes about wanting to push something through without thinking it through properly. So, anybody else wishing to speak? So do we wish to push it? Do we wish to send the letter? And do we wish to contact the other authorities in Norfolk asking them to join us in signing the letter? Yes.
Sorry,
Councillor
I'm
Holiday.
ignorant, obviously, but is the audit office the best lever?
Yes.
So
They
no
are
point
the
writing to
people.
Minister.
Yeah, the minister is part of the government, which I have to be careful what I say here, but you could argue is the guilty party within this. The body that would look at it and assess whether they have made, rushed ahead without getting the right information is the National Audit Office. And that was cleared by one of the national lead peers. Okay. So I'm happy to propose it, but I need a seconder, please. I'll go with Councillor Holiday. Thank you. So this is to send it on behalf of the audit committee and to write to the other audit committees and leaders within Norfolk, asking them whether they would like to join us in signing this letter. Okay. Is everyone agreed? Are the officers, sorry, was that something about what we're doing?
Just procedural.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't voting on something you weren't happy with us voting on. Right, in which case that's unanimously carried. Thank you. That ends the official meeting, unless, was it something? I would say give it 24 hours because we need to write to the other councils first and get some feedback from them. But once that's been done, I don't see why it shouldn't be shared. I mean, we're doing this on behalf of our residents. An electronic copy, yes, of course. I'm happy to let all members have an electronic copy. Just give me a couple of hours to. One moment, please.
We wonder if it'd be possible to raise something on where we objected to those earlier in the finance.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think it's good news. So but when we had the 2023-24 audit that EY did, then they had the disclaimed opinion. They weren't able to formally issue that opinion because they had to wait for the National Audit Office to see if they wanted to conduct extra procedures based on EY's work. That this week has since come through that they've got confirmation that we're not subject to any extra work there. So we've got the certificate which is signed by EY and now on our website. So that closes down that audit process for 23-24 on the financial statements.
Great. Fabulous news. Thank you. Do we want to look through the work programme or shall I sit down? I think I need to sit down with our new clerk and have a chat about different items and what we might bring forward. Yeah. In which case, if we're not going to look at, unless anyone's got anything they would urgently like brought to the work programme? No? So we don't need to exclude the press and public. So thank you all very much indeed for attending this afternoon, and that ends the meeting.